Oh, hello YouTube. Today's a day where I am officially starting to read my next book for Drunk Classics, which is, bam, Jane Eyre by Charlotte Brontë. I have been putting this one off mainly because it is incredibly long. It's like 600 pages, which is a lot of pages to have to be drinking during. So right now my plan of attack here is that I'm going to read it over the course of 4 days, because like drinking for 150 pages seems reasonable. Am I right? Yeah, I think I am. So that's the goal. I'm gonna read like it in quarters. I made my little markings in the book so I know how many pages I'm reading each day. So yeah, I'm gonna read the first 150 pages and check back in. I don't know how many glasses I will have drank by that point, but we'll find out together. So anyway, here we go. I'm gonna start Jane Eyre officially. Hi. I have overdrunk a bit. I have read 1/4 of Jane Eyre. Mainly, the whole thing that has happened is a lot of sad orphan time. That's what we're dealing with, but I will explain. The book starts off with Jane. She's like 10 years old, and she's just like a melancholy child. With reason, she's an orphan, you know? She has some shit to be upset about, but she's living with her aunt, Mrs. Reed, and her kids, and they're all like the worst humans that have ever existed. Well, maybe not that ever existed, but like they're terrible. And they all pick on her, especially like the son, John Reed. Like he is like a little psychopath. Like he likes inflicting pain on others for amusement. Like if this was modern day, I'd be like, this kid is going to serial kill people. Like he is a psychopath. But anyway, I digress. Basically, she's a mopey child. And she's not getting along with the Reeds, who have taken her in kind of her aunt relation family. Although they do call her Madam Mope at one point, which, like, you know what? Sick burn. I gotta give credit where credit's due. And then one day, Mrs. Reed, like her aunt, she's like, you know what? I'm done. You're like, I don't like you. I'm a mean lady, and I'm gonna send you to this, like, dour Christian school. Go there and be away from me, la la la. So like Jane finally loses her shit, and she's like, oh really, you're gonna send me to this school? You just told the headmaster of the school that I'm a terrible child and I'm a liar, so you've already set it up that everyone's gonna be mean to me there too. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna tell everybody how terrible you are. I'm telling everybody. Like, frankly, people will not get me to be able to shut up about it. Like, I'm telling everybody that ever walks in my path how awful you are and that you're a rotten person. Everybody. I'm never shutting up about it. Fuck you. So she goes to this school, right? And she gets there, and you know what? It's not so bad. She makes a friend named Helen. And then she makes a friend with a teacher, Miss Temple. And, you know, it's still very dour, but, like, you know what? She's had it worse. So she's kind of, like, thriving in this school. She learns how to draw, and she's kind of happy about that kind of stuff. Although the school is kind of a shithole because, like, there's never enough food. None of the girls in the school have, like, enough winter clothes, so, like, there's also no heat in the building, and they're in a cold area, so, like, everybody's constantly freezing. So, you know, she's having some issues, but she's like, hey, you know what? Not with the Reeds. So she's counting it as a win. Remember that headmaster that Miss Reed was talking to and telling him all these stories about how Jane's a terrible child? Like, he shows up and everyone's like, oh no, because he's like the worst human. I think his name is Mr. Blockhurst, and he's just terrible. Like the worst, like, evangelical Christian guy that's ever been put on paper. And he's just like, no, starving is a virtue. I'm not giving you more money for food. You don't need warm clothes. Being cold is a virtue. Like, just bullshit type of stuff. And then he finally, like, zero in on Jane, and he's like, oh, it's time to humiliate a child because he's a grown man and this is like a fair use of his time, apparently. So he's like, Jane, get up on this stool. Stand on this stool. You gotta stand here for an hour. By the way, everybody, look at Jane. Everyone look at Jane. She's a liar. Ha ha ha. She's an agent of the devil and she's a liar. Like, he just goes off on a tirade on a literal child. He's a grown-ass man. So like Helen, comes to comfort her because they're friends, and Miss Temple, like the nice teacher, she's like, come to my office, let's have tea, tell me what happened, like I want to hear your side of things. And this is the part where I'm like, okay, is this Matilda? Like Miss Temple is obviously like Miss Honey, very much like the nice teacher amongst like this school full of very strict, awful, authoritarian native people. That's not even a word. But anyway, like it's a very strict, authoritative, awful to kids school. And then Miss Temple's there and she's like, oh, I'm nice. And then you have Jane who's there who just likes reading by herself and being studious and nice to other people. It's Matilda. Am I wrong? No, I'm not. It's Matilda. I mean, Matilda did come out far later than Jane Eyre, but like I feel like there's like a link that no one talks about. If Jane Eyre somehow developed telekinesis, it would just be Matilda. Anyway, back onto the story. So like more time goes on and Jane is in the school and it gets colder, and then like there's a typhus outbreak and like all the girls in the school are getting typhus. They're all sitting sick and dying. And even Helen, although she's not dying from typhus, she's dying from consumption, completely different disease. And it's just like Jane can't catch a break. Like her best friend, the only friend she's really made, dies of consumption. So it's just like, oh my gosh, kick an orphan while they're down, why don't you? And then there's like this big time jump and like several years go by. And now Jane is 18 and she, has finished her education at the school. She's been a teacher there for a couple years even. And Miss Temple marries some clergyman and leaves the school. So she's like, well, I got nothing to stay here for. I should spread my wings. Like, what is outside of this school? Like, this is where I've been for like most of my life. Maybe I should go somewhere else. So she just kind of puts an ad in the paper like, hey, governess for sale, who wants one? And someone writes her back, is like, hey, I need a governess. And she's like, cool. So she takes on this post with this woman named Miss Fairfax. She has to go to this estate called Thornfield, and she's gonna be tutoring this one little girl named Sophie. She's a little French girl named Sophie. And then she finds out more stuff, like when she gets there, like, oh, this little girl Sophie is actually the ward of, Mr. Rochester, which I know because this has been in the cultural zeitgeist for a while. I know Rochester's the love interest here, so like that's the ward, and she's there teaching the ward. They have a good time and whatever, but she still hasn't met Mr. Rochester. And time has gone by, and then one day she's like, I'm gonna go mail a letter because I'm Jane Eyre and I'm sturdy. I don't know what Jane Eyre thinks, but she goes off and she mails a letter, and she's coming back to the house and she sees this guy on a horse, right? And then there's ice and he falls off his horse, and she's like, oh no, I should help this guy. And so she goes, helps the guy. She's like, hey, do you need help? Like, I can help with things. And she realizes, oh, the guy I helped who fell off his horse was the Mr. Rochester. And that's where my reading ended for the day. Basically, Jane has gone from 10 to 18 in this period of time. She lived a shitty orphan life for like a long time, and now she's a governess in this fancy house, but like doing okay. Like maybe things are gonna be okay for Jane Eyre. She's hardworking, a young woman out on her own, making her way in the big city. Well, it's not the big city, it's just a big estate called Thornfield, and she's making her way in it. The only like weird thing in the house is that she keeps hearing like laughter, and they bring it up several times, and she hears this like creepy laughter around. And she gets told it's one of the other servants. So she's like, what is this servant's deal? She is just cackling all over the place. But she's like, yeah, okay, whatever. I mean, I've dealt with worse. So that's the only like weird like thing she has. But she's very happy at Thornfield, and that's it. So basically I just read 150 pages of someone kicking an orphan. Oh yeah, so on that note, I'm going to stop officially reading for today. I'm gonna come back tomorrow. I'm gonna read the next 150 so pages and, tell you what happens there, because like I can't read more than this today because I am already drunky pants. La la la. Oh, hello YouTube. It is day 2 of Jane Eyre. I'm so excited. I'm going to read the second quarter of this book, so I'm hoping some cool stuff happens. I don't know. We just got introduced to Rochester, which I believe is supposed to be the love interest, so maybe there'll be some developments. I don't know. I guess I'm just going to have to read and find out. Hi. Okay, so here's the deal. I didn't realize how many glasses of wine I drank until I was at this point in my life. And that's my fault. It is, but I read like 180 pages today. So I read like a fair amount. I think I'm like slightly over halfway through Jane Eyre, which is insane that it's so long. It's 600 pages. It's so long. Like I mentioned in day one, Jane finally met Rochester, who I know is supposed to be the love interest. Like I know these things. And they finally have their formal sit down in Rochester. He's just like a super moody dude, Like he just like waxes poetic about shit and has like all of the drama. He's like the biggest emo kid. He's like millennials now, where we're all like kind of in our 30s and still emo about stuff. Like that is Rochester to a T. He's an aging emo kid. But that being said, he kind of likes Jane in general because, she's there and not a child. Well, I mean, she's like 18, so she's like kind of a child, but she's not like 10 or like 8 or 10 or whatever the age of the ward is. She's like a grown-up kind of. So he's like, oh, you're the only person here who's around my age I can talk to. So it's kind of, they form this friendship based purely off that. And that's what they do. They hang out and he tells her just long-winded stories about shit. And you know what? He even like tells her the story about like his French opera singing mistress lady. And he was with her for a while and they found out she was cheating and he's like, nope, leave here, bitch. I'm not dealing with you. And then I guess like years later, this opera lady, she came back to him and she's like, hey, this kid Adele, it's your kid, you take her. And he's like, all right. So that's how he got Adele his award, because his opera lady allegedly says it's his kid. I mean, he even thinks, he's like, this kid looks 0% like me. Like even he knows it's not my kid, but like he takes in the kid anyway. Cause I'm like, I guess he has some like goodness in his heart, his moody little emo heart he has. He still took in the kid. He's like, you know what? This lady's obviously not good for this child. I'll take the kid, even though it's not his kid. Like, it's very obviously not his kid, but that's how he has Adele, the little ward. And then, all of this hanging out with each other, like, Jane just kind of falls in love with him. And I mean, like, he's probably the first grown adult man she's talked to since she's become a woman. Like, she's talked to like a servant here or there, but she's never talked to like an adult man with any length. So he's literally like the first guy she's talked to. There's not a lot of competition here for her to be in love with him. And he's not like particularly attractive. He is old enough to be her father. And like there's a whole lot of stuff going on here. But she's like, I'm in love. And I'm like, you know what? At 18, yeah, you would believe that too. So I'm not blaming Jane for falling in love with this guy, even though like it's probably not a good idea. And like a big part of the second quarter of the book is that like creepy shit is escalating throughout the house. So like there's this one night, right, Jane? She's sleeping. She's like, oh, I'm sleeping. And then she hears like the creepy laughter and it freaks her out so bad. She thinks someone's going to come kill her in her room. So she's like, oh no, I'm going to go check where this laughter is coming from. And that's how you get murdered in slasher movies. You shouldn't do that, Jane. Anyway, she goes out in the hall and she's like, oh, I guess no one's here. What? Hark, is there smoke over there? Oh my gosh, it's coming from Rochester's room. So she runs in there and she's like, wake up, motherfucker, your bedroom's on fire. And then like he's all like delirious from smoke, so she's just throwing buckets of water. Any water she can find, she's throwing it at this fire and putting it out. And he finally gets up and he's like, oh my gosh, thank you for saving my life. And he like holds her hand. And I shit you not, I feel like it's the whole Pride and Prejudice 2005, like handhold and flex situation. I swear that's what's happening, because he holds it for like a really long time and then finally she's like, I'm gonna go to bed now. And he's like, oh, and I bet like he's doing the flex. He's doing it. I know he's doing the flex. But anyway, so like of course since they're getting closer, he has to go leave. So he leaves Rochester leaves. He goes to some house party for a couple weeks, and you know, Jane is kind of sad. She's like, what am I doing? Obviously, you know what, this guy, he's old enough to be my father. He's my employer. He obviously is not into me. I'm being a stupid child, like harboring romantic feelings about this gentleman. I shouldn't do this. So she's having her own little like moral conscience moment. But anyway, you know, party's end. So Rochester, everyone hears Rochester's coming back, but he brings the party with him. Like, this house party is just switching houses. So he brings all the people from the house party he was at to his house for another party. Dude, rich people are just crazy. They just party all the time. That's all they do. They go over to each other's houses and drink all their booze. I don't know. I mean, it's a good job if you could get it. But anyway, so the guests all come, including this one woman. Her name is Blanche Ingram, right? And she is like the coolest girl in town. And she's like a little debutante. She's like rich and like witty, and everyone likes her. And she has like gorgeous hair and stuff. Like, she's like the girl. And of course, Jane is like heartbroken over this because everyone assumes like Rochester is going to ask Miss Ingram to marry him because like she's the shit. So she's feeling heartbroken about it. She makes it very clear in the book though. She's like, I am not jealous. Like, she makes like a whole page like explaining how she's not jealous. She's just heartbroken. So I'm like, okay, I'll let you win this one, Jane Eyre. And then there's just like a house party for kind of almost the whole rest of the second quarter of the book here. So, you know, they do party stuff, and people are snobs and not nice to Jane and stuff, but she's kind of just like dealing with that. Especially Miss Ingram, that Blanche Ingram, she's a real bitch. Here is the party pooper of the situation. This guy shows up, and it says his name is Mason. He's from the West Indies, and he knows Rochester. And Jane tells him this guy Mason showed up, and like Rochester has a conniption. He's like, oh no, oh no, oh no. Like, he is like freaking the F out that this guy is here. So Jane's like, I don't know what this is about. I'm not gonna ask. I don't want to get into this, but like, I worry. And so later that night, it's like the middle of the night, everyone's sleeping. Jane's sleeping again. Jane can't get a night's rest in this house because she gets woken up by like a blood-curdling scream and someone saying, help, help, help. So like everybody wakes up, everyone's out in the hall going, what the hell's happening? Blah, 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 blah. And like Rochester comes out, he's like, don't worry about it, don't worry about it. It's good, it's taken care of, go back to bed. And everyone just does for reasons. And he's like, hey, Jane, grab sponges and smelling salts, and I need to stat. Come follow me. You know, like some serial killer shit here. And she just goes, okay. Doesn't wonder why, like, I heard blood-curdling screams and I need to bring sponges. Like, oh no, something bad has happened, and she doesn't even occur to her. So anyway, they go up, and they're in the third story of the house, which no one really ever goes to. And she goes into this room, right? And she sees all these tapestries, except one of them's like askew now, and she sees there's a door behind it. In the room as well is that guy Mason who showed up, and he is bloody as all hell. Like, he is all cut up and disgusting. And that's why she had to bring the smelling salt, so they like rouse him and stuff. And then, and Rochester's like, Jane, here's the deal. I gotta go get the doctor for this guy because he's bleeding all over my carpet. You gotta stay here and just keep sponging the blood up. By the way, don't talk to each other. I'm out. And so like a few hours go by, he shows back up with the doctor. And then the doctor's like looking at his wounds going, what the fuck happened to this guy? Like, shit went down. And, you know, Jane's still in the room at this point. She's just off in the corner. But like, the guy Mason starts talking about like, oh, she was in there, she had a knife and she was gonna stab me and I tried to defend myself. But when I was defending myself, she bit me and she drank my blood. Like, she's talking about this woman going apeshit on him. And like, what, are there vampires now? Like, oh my gosh, the serial killer behavior that is going on in this house. And honestly, poor Jane, she has to be like the most confused person in England right now. She's like, I was sleeping. And on top of it, one day, this visitor comes and he's like, hey, Jane, remember me? And she's like, I remember you. You worked for the Reeds when I lived there. And he's like, I did. Also, hey, guess what? You know your cousin John? Yeah, he's way dead. He was a degenerate weirdo and did weird stuff like weird stuff, and he's dead now. And then your aunt found out about it and had a stroke, and then she's been asking for you nonstop. You gotta come see her. And Jane's like, oh, well, okay, I guess I have to go see her. She had a stroke. So, I guess, I don't know, Catholic guilt, who knows? But she's like, I'm gonna go. And she goes to ask Rochester. She's like, hey, I need to take a couple weeks off. Like, this lady, I gotta go deal with this shit. And Rochester's like, I don't want you to go. You gotta promise to come back in a week. Like, just very codependent. And he's like, please, you gotta come back. I don't want you to go. Here's money. No, you can't have that much money because it makes you won't come back. So he's just like being a baby about it. And he doesn't really want her to go, but he lets her go. And then she goes all the way back to the Reeds. Her cousins are still shitty people. Her aunt is still like a petty bitch, like the pettiest bitch you know, because you find out, hey, guess what? Jane's mother is Mr. Reed's sister, and the mother married this guy named Eyre. So that's how she got her name and whatever. And then the Eyres, other relations from the Eyres, they show up. Like, I guess her dad's brother or something shows up, and he's like, hey, I am really good at selling wine. I have a bunch of money and stuff. I want to adopt Jane and give her like all my money and stuff. Where is she? Could you tell me where she is? And you know what that bitch did? What Mrs. Reed did? She wrote to him and said, hey, guess what? Jane's dead. She died of typhus at Lowood. Uh-oh, so bad, so sad to be you. Fuck off. Like, that is a whole other level of petty. Where she hated this child so much that she wouldn't even let her get adopted by people who would like her. Like, that's how fucking petty this lady was. And Jane's like, oh my gosh, okay, fine, whatever, I forgive you. Go die now. And then she does. So the aunt passes away, and the cousins are all shitty still, and Jane's like, all right, well, I guess I'm gonna go back to Thornton where Mr. Rochester lives. I guess I'm gonna go back to my house now because like this is done. So that's like about halfway through the book. Basically, Jane's aunt is the pettiest bitch who's ever lived, and there's all sorts of creepy serial killer behavior happening at Mr. Rochester's house that no one is addressing. Jane, girl, like, I get it. You maybe have low self-esteem, but you've got to ask some questions. Like, you can't just go with the flow on this one. If someone says, hey, I need you to go come clean up blood, you should maybe ask a couple questions, am I right? Anyway, that's it for today. I need to go take a nap. It is day 3 of Jane Eyre. I am very excited. I'm going to read, I guess the third quarter? Yeah, the third quarter of Jane Eyre. And I am super pumped to see what happens. Let's get into it. Oh no. I'm out of wine. Where this starts off. So Jane's going back to Thornfield, right? Because like her aunt's dead. She doesn't have anything to do with the Reeds anymore. She's like, I'm blowing this popsicle stand. I'm going back to Thornfield because I really like Rochester. And she gets back to Thornfield, and it's like a whole like romance movie. The rain is pouring, coming to like terms with your feelings moment. And I was like, oh my goodness, it's so dramatic and I love it. So she gets there, right? And then she sees Rochester, and he's just like in the garden, and it's like midnight and it's raining, and she's walking home because she's like, I don't know, she likes to suffer, I guess. And she sees him, and they have this whole thing, and she's like, sure, he's going to marry Blanche Ingram, the lady that he's been flirting with. He's like, and he's like kind of saying like, yeah, I'm going to get married in like a month. It's going to happen. And finally she's like, well, you know what? Not cool, bro. Like, I am in love with you, and you think you could just do me dirty like this? But like, Blanche, she sucks. Like, have you met her? Because I have. That lady sucks. And I love you, and you love her, and she sucks. It's like she just has it out. However, flipperoo, turns out Rochester, 0 100% intentions of marrying Blanche Ingram. He was going to marry Jane. He just had to ask her. It was like this big romantic moment. And he's just like, I'm in love with you. Let's get married. And she's like, what? And he's like, yeah. And she's like, oh my gosh, yes. So like they're very happy. And they're having all of this lovey-dovey stuff, which is super cute because you know what? Let them be in love. I like seeing people in love. This is why I like romance novels. And then, you know, nothing really happens. Time just goes on for a little bit because they're going to get married in a month. And the month goes by. And like a couple nights before the wedding, some freaky stuff starts happening in the house again. Because you know how Jane keeps hearing like this creepy laughter? And she thinks it belongs to Grace, who's like one of the other servants in the house, so she thinks is a weirdo. She starts hearing creepy stuff, and then she's having weird dreams, and she wakes up in the middle of the night and she sees like a strange lady in her room. And this lady's being weird, and she's like examining the wedding dress and putting on her wedding veil and like freaking out about it, and then like destroying the wedding veil and just being kind of crazy, but she doesn't hurt Jane. And Jane like has a full panic attack and is just like paralyzed in fear, and then wakes up the next morning and she tells Rochester about what happened. She's like, hey, listen, there's a creepy lady in my room. And he's like, oh, well, you got woken up from a deep sleep. It was probably Grace. You know, that darn Grace. She's just like a character, ain't she? Good thing she didn't get hurt, but like, don't worry about it. Don't ask me questions till after we're married. It's a real sketchy, and Jane doesn't ask any questions about this. And like, the whole point of why Rochester likes Jane is because she's really opinionated. And like, she asks 0 questions. She still hasn't even asked questions about that time she had to go mop up blood in the middle of the night. Like, girl, now is the time to ask some questions. Anyway, so she goes to sleep, and it's the day of the wedding, right? And they're going to the chapel, and she's all happy. She's in her wedding dress, and they get there. They're literally at the altar. The priest is saying the wedding stuff, and he's like, hey, anyone got an objection? And someone objects. Like, that never happens. However, someone objects to this wedding. And it's this guy who's like a lawyer, right? Turns out, Rochester, yeah, he's already married to this other lady who's still alive. And it's like that like lawyer guy's sister. And it's also that guy Mason who showed up earlier who got bit and stabbed by the lady. Her brother. So like the lady that bit and stabbed him is obviously his sister and Rochester's wife, who he has like locked in the attic. Like, obviously this woman is suffering from some kind of mental illness. It doesn't go into what it is. It has to be something extreme, because the way they describe this woman is extreme mental illness with like slight periods of lucidity. And, you know, like, I don't think locking her in the attic is probably the best choice, considering she keeps getting out of the attic, like, on the rag. Like, she set fire to his bedroom. She walks around laughing to herself in the night. She, like, got into Jane's room. Thank goodness she wasn't in a stabby mood that night, but like, oh my word, she just gets out of the attic all the time. This is not the place for her. So they cancel the wedding. The wedding's called off because, you know, he's already married. And so Rochester, he has to tell Jane the whole story, and he tells her this whole like tale of woe about how when he was like a younger guy and he was in Jamaica at his family's estate, like they like forced him into marrying this girl, and the girl's family kind of tricked him too. They didn't tell him her real age or really anything about her. It was all a bunch of lies, and he married her, and turns out, she's actually like older than they said she was, and she's also like insane. So like right away the wedding turns into a horror movie, and he's like, oh no. So, you know, like he kind of got dicked here. Like I feel for the guy, and like he has some type of compassion because he doesn't like just send her off to some insane asylum, which by the way in this era was just hell on earth. So he like keeps her in the attic with like a nurse. That lady Grace is actually her nurse. He kind of just wants to pretend like he's not married. He doesn't change the fact that legally he's married, but like he's like, I'm not married. He just wants to pretend he's not married. Full denial. And obviously Jane, she's still heartbroken. She's like, this is like a mega sin. Like, no, I'm not gonna marry you. You're already married to someone else. Like, I understand why you do it. I still love you. I forgive you. But like, I'm not gonna stay here and be your mistress. Because like Rochester's like, please, like I love you, you're the only good thing in my life. Like we'll go to France. We'll go to France and hang out and like we'll get married there. No one knows. Like it'll be fine. And she says no. Which like, I mean, maybe I just have looser morals than she does. But like I would have taken him up on the offer. Especially like since they're so like both in love with each other. And he's like, hey, let's go to France. I have an estate there. We'll live there. We'll get married. It's going to be great. No one will know I was ever married again because, like, frankly, no one in England knows I'm married. Only people in Jamaica know I was married, and then they showed up here to ruin this wedding. No one knows. We get just to go over there and hang out. It'll be totally cool. And, like, I would be kind of okay with it, you know? This is France in the Regency era. Shit was wild, okay? They didn't give a shit about nothing. So, like, they could have got away with it if Jane was just like, you know what? I get it. I feel you. Like, let's go get married so we could be happy. But she's like, nope, need to suffer more because I'm Jane Eyre and I like to suffer apparently. So she turns it down and she decides I need to leave Thornfield because I can't be in the situation and see this person every day that I know I can't be with. So I'm like, I get that. But anyway, so she decides I'm going to sneak away in the middle of the night and then not say goodbye and then I'll just be gone. And she doesn't do any planning. She just like leaves in the middle of the night. She doesn't bring any real money with her. She just like gets on a random cart she sees and says, where are you going? All right, I'm going that direction too. And so she's like, has no money. She doesn't have any clothes. She's just literally there. Like, girl, like, aren't you a governess? Aren't you supposed to be smart? You're educated. Like, plan something out. But she doesn't. So she's just off in this like new like little town she doesn't know anybody at. And she's starving and she's like sleeping out in the woods. She's basically begging for food and like scraps of bread because she's literally starving and sleeping in the woods. Like, this is what she's done to herself. Girl, you could have lived in a mansion in Paris. Like, what is wrong with you? I don't know. And then this third quarter kind of wraps up because Jane, she like sees like a light in the distance. She goes to it and it turns out to be this little house. And she's like begging them. She's like, please help me. Please, I'm sad. And eventually they're like, okay, they take pity on her. They gave her some food and they let her stay. And she tells them all her name is Jane Elliott because now she's going by an alias. And that's kind of where I stopped reading for today. And that was the end of 3/4 of Jane Eyre. Look at this. I've read 3/4 of it. And by the way, 3/4 of the way through this book is 432 pages. This book is insanely long and it's just all suffering. And I haven't really talked about this in a minute, but like every time Rochester speaks, it's like so long. Like he just talks in soliloquies. Like they just go on forever. Like I am fully convinced he is like the epitome of an aging emo kid. Like he's an aging millennial emo kid because everything he says is just constantly the most emo stuff you have ever heard. It sounds like he's quoting like My Chemical Romance lyrics. Tell me he's not. You can't. And then Jane likes to suffer. And I drank all my wine. This is bottle 2, by the way. I have finished 2 bottles so far, and it's been 3 days. I'm gonna stop for today, and I'm gonna come back tomorrow. I'm gonna finish this bitch, and we'll see what happens, okay? Because, like, this 3rd quarter of the book was where all of the drama happened. It was just bonkers. Bonkers insanity, and I need more wine. Oh, hello everybody. It is officially day 4 of Jane Eyre. I am going to be finishing this today, this 600-page beast of a classic. It's going to be done today. So far, so good. I've been having a nice time. I am considering going easy on the wine today because I've been going hard for the past 3 days. So I'm gonna just like take it easy. I'm gonna have a little bit of wine. I'm trying to pace myself today because I got about 150 pages to read. And then I will have completed Jane Eyre. So I will check in after I am done reading. I have finished Jane Eyre. And you know what? I did go easy on the wine. This is glass 3 and I just poured it. So I've only had 2 glasses. Let's discuss. So where we last left off, Jane went into this house where these people kind of took pity on her, right? And then she just kind of starts living with them, and they're the Rivers family. There's like these 2 women and their brother. And John is the brother. He's like this country pastor guy. And he offers Jane a job as headmistress of this girls' school he's like starting right now. And so she's like, oh, cool. Yeah, I want to earn my keep. I'll totally take the position. This sounds awesome. I'll have my own little cottage. We're doing great. And then life goes on. She's just having an okay time in town. She's teaching all the kids. She likes them and stuff. And she starts getting to know everybody, and especially like she gets like to know John quite a bit. He sees this painting that Jane has been working on because Jane's an artist. And he goes, he like has a gasp moment, and he rips a little piece of it off, and he leaves. And Jane's like, okay, weirdo, like, all right. But later on, like a couple days go by or something, and John comes back, and he's like, hey, Jane, like, I know you told us all your name is Jane Elliott, but like, I know you're Jane Eyre because like, oh, this piece of paper I stole from your painting, yeah, you wrote Jane Eyre on it, like, like a dummy. Here's the deal. You know that lawyer who broke up her wedding to Rochester? He has been looking for Jane all around town, all throughout England, because apparently that lawyer guy, you know, Rochester's wife's brother is a lawyer, but he's also the lawyer for Jane's like long lost uncle. So this is like way too connected for such a big world. But anyway, he was also the long lost uncle's like lawyer, and the uncle unfortunately has passed away, and he's also left his entire fortune to Jane. And John finds out about it, and John's the one who tells her. He's like, hey, listen, yeah, you got 20,000 pounds coming to you. And she's like, what? She's an heiress now? So like things are turning around. And then they come back with a double whammy, because also it turns out, you know, the rivers, they're actually the Eyre rivers, because like his name is like John E. River, and the E stands for Eyre. They're actually her cousins, and they're not even lying about it. There was like this thing earlier on where the Rivers got this like letter saying like their long lost uncle died, and he left all his money to someone else instead of them, because like the uncle and their dad had like a fight. And so that letter came, and like Jane Eyre was the lady from the letter that got all the money. So like they're cousins. What? How is this happening? How did she magically stumble upon the one house with people who would take her in when she's all like beggarly, and it turns out they're her cousins? Like, what is happening? But anyway, like Jane is like, oh my gosh, you guys have been so nice to me, and like all she really wants is family, and she's never really had any. So she's like, you guys come be in my family. I'll split the inheritance between all of us. You all can have 5,000 pounds each. I'm down. I want to do it. She's very adamant about it, and so she like splits up the inheritance amongst her family members. And then things are good for a while. Jane's really excited. She has like a family. She has like, you know, de facto sisters and a brother. So she's been happy living with them. And she has a little bit of money now, so she's doing good. She's doing good for herself. However, the other shoe has to drop, because they've had this whole windfall that like all of a sudden John, he's like, hey Jane, guess what? I'm gonna be a missionary. I'm gonna go to India. And by the way, you should marry me. I'm going to marry you and bring you to India with me. We're gonna go be missionaries. And Jane is like, what? Excuse me? No way, bro. Literally, bro, because she thinks of you as a brother. We're brother and sister. I'm not marrying my brother. Like, she's just, oh my gosh, weird. And he just keeps nagging her about it, and he's just like insane. And this goes on for like an uncomfortable amount of time. Like probably, I don't know, close to 50 pages. He's just nagging her about this. And she's like, oh my gosh, I'll think about it, fine. And he's like, woo, yay. However, like, that night after she finally says to John, like, all right, I'll think about it, she gets this weird premonition, right? She gets this premonition that Mr. Rochester, like, needs her. Like, he's in trouble and he needs her. So she's like, oh my gosh, I gotta go back to Thornfield. Like, something's wrong. I feel it in my bones. So that's what she does. She, like, packs up. She goes back to Thornfield, and she gets there, and oh my goodness gracious, guess what? Thornfield has burned to the ground. Like, it's just rubble. And she's like, oh my gosh, what is going on? So she goes to town to find someone to tell her what happened at Thornfield, and then she finally finds a guy who like was familiar with the situation, and he was just like, yeah, remember like Rochester had like a lunatic at the house and everyone was kind of like weird about it, and it turned out to be his wife, and then that girl he wanted to marry like took off, and then like he was inconsolable for months. Like he was searching high and low for her all over the land, inconsolable, right? Few months after she leaves, right, the lunatic gets out. Turns out his wife, you know, the lunatic, she got out and like burnt the whole house down. She was like setting everything on fire. And Rochester was there and he was trying to get everyone out of the house, and he makes sure all the servants get out. And then whilst trying to get out himself, like he got hurt in the fire, and like he lost an eye and they lost a hand, and then he kind of went blind in his other eye. So now he's like blind, and he's missing his right hand. And he tells her that Rochester, he moved to one of his other estates called Ferndale. So he went to this other estate in the country, and that's where he's been living. Jane's like, oh my gosh, how far is it to there? And he's like, oh, it's like this far. And she's like, I will pay you double if you take me literally now. And he's like, you got it, lady. So she gets on his little cart and they go to Ferndale. And then from here on, the rest of the book is just one big happy ending. Just all of it's just happiness to the max. So Jane and Rochester, they reconcile. She finally comes back to him. Mind you, he's blind, so he's just like, oh my gosh, can I touch your face? Like a full-on thing like that. And, you know, they both still are in love with each other. It was like a big, like, I still love you moment. It's big romance. And he's just like, all right, let's get married, like, stat. And she's like, yeah, I'm totally in for that plan. So they get married, like, in 3 days. Like, they get married, like, immediately. and then the rest of the story is just telling what happens after their big reconciliation and they get married. Like, her cousins, the 2 women cousins, they both get married to dudes that are nice, and they're all happy. And then Jane and Rochester and the cousins, like, they all visit each other from time to time, so she has, like, extended family now. Like, Jane's doing well. Also, the little girl, Adele, got sent off to school and stuff, so she goes to the school and she's like, Adele, and Adele's like, oh my gosh, and they have a big happy reunion, and she kind of takes Adele back to Ferndale. She's like, you can come be with us and stuff. So, like, Adele's back and she's happy. And then John, he just went off and became a missionary, like what he was going to do. He went to India and he became a missionary, and that's just what he does for the rest of his life. And all of that's jolly and great. Like, ooh, they all lived happily ever after. But wait, there's more happily ever after to be had. You remember how Rochester's blind in his one remaining eye? Well, after some time goes by, after they've been married for a while, he starts, like, regaining vision in his eye. And, I mean, it's not perfect. Like, he can't, like, read and write because he can't see that well. But, like, he can see shapes and colors and light and dark. So, like, he can see someone walking across a room and know it's a person walking across a room, which is everything's kind of blurry. But, like, hey, not bad. It means he can kind of get around on his own now, so he's, like, more independent and stuff. I'm like, wow, even you're healing the blind in this happy ending. And then you find out that Jane and Rochester, they have a son, and they're all happy, and he could see the baby because his eye got better. And then they all just live happily ever after. And that's the end of it. And final thought, I feel like this happily ever after ending, like, hit so hard because so much of the rest of the book was just abject misery. Everyone was just going through trouble and hardships and sadness for so long that when you have, like, an ounce of happy, it just, like, hits you in the face, and they're like, oh, you want an ounce of happy? Take a bucket. And they're like, I'm just drowning in happiness. It's, like, intense. So yeah, it's a big, intense, happy ending. And, like, I'm a sucker. I love a happy ending. I love it. Yeah, make them not blind anymore. Make them be happy. They've suffered enough. This whole book was suffering, okay? Let them be happy for a minute. And they made babies, and they're, like, living their lives and happy and stuff. And they're not poor, because apparently he has a bunch of other properties. He's, like, stupid rich, apparently. I don't really know how rich, but, like, he's really rich. So in the end, did I enjoy Jane Eyre? The answer is yes. I did enjoy Jane Eyre. I think it was pretty good. I ended up giving it, like, 5 stars just because, like, I understand why it's thought of as a masterpiece. Like, it is a lot to go through, and it's a chonker. It's so much. It could have probably been shorter. I've read a lot of similar stories. This tropes of this book and the arc of the story is very common, and it happens a lot even in modern historical romance, and they get that shit done in about 350 pages. So, do I think this could have been, like, condensed? Yes, I do. However, whatever. It is what it is, and I had a good time with it. I think it is worth the hype. It has a lot of really poetic lines. Overall, I kind of feel like Jane Eyre is grown-up Matilda, and Rochester's an aging emo kid, and they're in love. There you go. That's Jane Eyre, everybody. Let me know in the comments down below, are you a Jane Eyre fan? And if so, what's your favorite part of it? Or is there another? I know the Brontë sisters wrote many things. Do you like one of those better than Jane Eyre? Let me know in the comments down below. If you like this video, make sure you give it a like. And if you want to see more videos, make sure you subscribe. And I'll see you guys soon. Bye!